Hi, this is Ted. Today I'm going to be talking about Hank Kunnamen and some of his prophecy. Actually, I'm going to go back to 2020 and see what he said about 2020. Now, first of all, I do want to introduce you to two words. If you don't know about these words already, I've talked about some of them before. Hindsight bias. It has very little to do with what I'm talking about today, but it's a great word to know. I got hindsight bias from books having to do with foretelling the future for businesses, for things like sports, etc., etc. So future casting, not necessarily future telling or prophecy, but they all do it. Hindsight bias is the ability to look back on what you've been predicting and see that you are incredibly accurate. But when people really do the homework, they find out you were not as accurate as you thought you were. And if you were to do your homework, and if you were to record everything you say word for word, you're going to find out that you weren't as accurate as you thought you were. We call this hindsight bias. I tend to think I'm a lot better than I really was. And you'll hear prophets talking about how great and how accurate they were. You will hear, and it's not just the prophets that do hindsight bias. Followers can be the worst at hindsight bias. In other words, they will see, and the reason they see this is something that is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is that bias that is going to establish that which I already believe in. It's looking for and focusing on those things that I believe in already and naturally just rejecting things that I don't believe in. This is confirmation bias is very popular. It's something that we all do, whether we know it or not, whether we like to admit it or not, to some degree or another. Hopefully we find ways to get over our own confirmation bias, and that usually comes through testing and looking at and studying and digging into and creating some kind of way to look back and say, did this really happen? Did I really say that? And it might be. Now, I've predicted some stuff for 2021. And I did this not because I believe God is giving this to me, but rather I want to see how accurate I am compared to these people who have been prophets giving us the 2021 situation. And in mine, I will go back to it eventually, and I will comment why I will have failed in some areas and why I was better than what the prophets had said in other areas. I'll do that another time. So those are the two biases that I want to talk about today: confirmation bias and hindsight bias.
And 2020 is about the wait is over. How many of you have been waiting? You that are watching, how many of you have been waiting for a long time and struggling, been beat up, troubled by the enemy? I'm here to prophesy to you 2020 is Isaiah 61:7. For your shame you shall receive double. If you have been dishonored, that scripture declares, you shall rejoice in your portion. How many about to rejoice in your portion? 2020 is about God saying, the wait is over. Come on, someone shout, the wait is over. And it's not just the delay or the wait, but how many understand W-E-I-G-H-T? There has been a heaviness, there has been a weight, there has been a yoke that has weighed some of you down. Your burden has been great. But God in this season, with the sound that He is releasing in the earth, is lifting the weight, the delay time, the delay period. And I'm here to speak to you right now that as you enter into 2020, you're not just entering into a new year, but the Spirit of God is declaring that 2020 shall mark a beginning of a decade that shall be known in the earth and for His people as the decade of distinction, the decade of difference. It's going to be different. Are you listening by the way of Daystar? It is going to be different. Lift up a shout and prophesy. Come on.
Now, when I'm watching Hank Kunnamen, If you were to ask people after the church service what he prophesied, I doubt if any of them would be all that accurate about anything that he said. But what they are going to see and what they are going to be talking about is God is doing amazing things in the world. We are entering into a fantastic time. And that hype and that excitement is what it's all about. So you don't have to be all that accurate as long as you can get people hyped up and excited. And one of the best ways of doing that is promising a fantastic, exciting future. And that is precisely what he's doing. I find a lot of what he says is vague, and this is territory that if you really want to learn how to be a false prophet, what you have to do is learn the art of being vague, saying stuff that will get people excited while really saying nothing clear at all. And this is precisely what I'm seeing in some of what he's doing. And he will talk about the elections coming up. He will talk about all kinds of things this next decade from the point of 2020. So the whole 20th, the second decade, this will be the third decade, from 2020 to 2030. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a time where God is doing amazing things, prepping the world and all this kind of stuff. And what he's doing is he's getting everybody charged up. It's hype. He's hyping people up. And they will be more attracted, I think, to the hype than they will be to anything that he's saying. It's kind of like if I go to a movie and it's all hyped up. If I go to the movie and it just turns out to be a real bomb, I'm disappointed. But there's a conclusion to my little hype, because I have gone through it and I learned the hype was not real. It was not fit for me. They're not going to face that. Why? Because he's talking about something so general that it's hard to pinpoint something and say that is precisely it. And when these things don't happen, they can hide behind so much. And one thing they hide behind is not being clear about what they're predicting. So when you predict something in general terms, people can easily say, well, either they just shrug it off because it's just like, who knows what it really meant, but God did whatever it is. All right, I'm kind of rambling now, so I'm just going to leave it with you right now, and I hope you all have a good one. This is Ted. Bye.